Dust hung thick in the late afternoon air, clinging to every surface of the rough, sun-baked landscape. The distant hills were hazy under the orange glow of the setting sun, and a tense silence filled the open plains. A single wagon rattled harshly along the dirt road, its wooden wheels groaning under the weight of more than just supplies. At the back of the wagon, a young Apache woman was bound tightly, her wrists raw and bleeding from the coarse ropes. Her chest heaved as she struggled, but the ropes bit into her skin with every desperate movement. The men around the wagon shouted and cursed, their faces twisted with cruelty and pride. Their leader, a man with a face hardened by years of greed and violence, raised a whip and hissed orders demanding that the woman be dragged along behind the wagon if she dared to resist. Fear had made her eyes wide and frantic, but even as the sun beat down and the road stretched mercilessly before her, there was a spark in her gaze, a stubborn refusal to give in to terror. From the distant horizon, a solitary figure appeared riding a calm, steady horse. He was a rancher, known in these parts for his quiet demeanor, yet his reputation for fairness and courage had spread across countless towns and settlements. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face, a dust-streaked shirt and sturdy boots that had carried him across many harsh trails. As he drew closer, the sound of his horse's hooves seemed almost like a drumbeat of hope against the cruel rhythm of the wagon wheels. People in the nearby town whispered about him, saying he had a way of stopping trouble before it began, not through noise or bluster, but through a calm certainty that unsettled even the most hardened outlaws. And today, it seemed, fate had guided him to this moment. The Apache woman's struggles had grown weaker. Her body was bruised, her spirit nearly broken, yet her eyes flicked upward at the sound of approaching hooves. She didn't know who was coming, but instinct whispered that help had arrived. The rancher slowed his horse at a careful distance, assessing the situation. His voice, low and steady, carried over the clamor. "Let her go." The men around the wagon laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made her heart sink. One stepped forward, whip raised high, ready to strike. But the rancher did not move quickly. He did not shout, he did not draw a gun. Instead, he held his ground, calm and unwavering, his gaze meeting the leaders with an unspoken warning. There was no fear in him, only quiet resolve. The leader's laughter faltered, replaced by a scowl. He stepped closer, circling the rancher like a predator testing prey. "Who do you think you are?" He sneered. "This ain't your business, stranger. Walk away or you'll end up like her." But the rancher simply shook his head, his voice firm yet calm. "No. It is my business when someone is about to be harmed for no reason at all. Let her go. Now." There was no anger in his words, only a clarity that seemed to cut through the desert air, sharp as a blade. The other men exchanged uneasy glances. There was something in this man's presence, in the steadiness of his stance, that made them hesitate. Fear of him was not born from guns or fists, but from the certainty that he would not back down, that he carried a weight of integrity that could not be ignored. The Apache woman, sensing a lifeline, summoned the last of her strength. She called out softly, a plea more to fate than to the rancher. "Please, don't let them—" Her words were cut short by the crack of a whip, and the wagon jolted, throwing dust into the air. But before the whip could strike again, the rancher moved, not violently, not recklessly, but with precision and control. He rode closer, raising his hand in a gesture of command, and spoke again, his voice carrying across the tense space. "Stop this. You don't need to do this." The leader froze. There was something almost uncanny in the calm confidence of the rancher. His presence demanded respect, and for a brief, miraculous moment, the men felt the weight of moral judgment pressing down on them. The standoff stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Sweat glistened on the foreheads of the men, and the wagon's creaking seemed unbearably loud. The Apache woman's heart pounded in her chest, but she dared to hope. The rancher's horse shifted, nudging him forward just enough to signal he was ready to act if necessary. But he did not attack. He relied solely on the power of his presence, on the certainty that justice sometimes required patience and courage rather than violence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the men's confidence waned. The leader's grip on his whip tightened, then loosened. His eyes darted between the rancher and the bound woman. He took a step back, then another. Something in the rancher's unyielding calm told him that this man would not leave until he did the right thing. Finally, with a grunt of frustration, the leader motioned to his men. The ropes binding the Apache woman were cut, and she collapsed forward, weak but free. The rancher dismounted and approached her carefully, kneeling down to her level. He offered his hand, his expression softening. "You're safe now," he said. Relief washed over her like a sudden rainstorm in the desert. Tears streamed down her dust-covered face as she grasped his hand, feeling the strength and steadiness of someone who truly cared. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. I thought..." She could not finish. Words were not enough to capture the depth of her gratitude. The rancher helped her to her feet, guiding her away from the wagon and the men who had tried to harm her. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains, painting the scene with a golden light that seemed almost sacred. He did not boast, he did not speak of heroics. He simply led her to safety, proving that courage is often quiet and that doing what is right does not always require noise, only conviction. The Apache woman, now standing on solid ground, took a deep breath and felt a new sense of hope. She had been saved not by luck, but by a man who understood that the world needed more kindness, more bravery, and more people willing to stand up for what is right. As the rancher walked away, back toward his horse, he glanced over his shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, almost to himself, "even in the darkest moments, someone is watching. Someone can intervene, and maybe, just maybe, someone like you can be that person for someone else someday." His words, gentle yet firm, lingered in the air, leaving an impression that would last a lifetime. The Apache woman nodded, inspired not just by her rescue but by the example of courage she had witnessed. The wind carried the sound of hooves and dust as the rancher rode away, disappearing into the horizon. But the story of what had happened that day, the courage, the calm intervention, and the triumph of humanity over cruelty, would echo in the hearts of those who heard it. And now, dear viewer, if you want to hear more stories like this, tales of bravery, of hope, and of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Every week we bring you stories that inspire, captivate, and remind us all that courage and kindness can change the world. Hit that subscribe button and join our journey through stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark, because heroes are everywhere, and the next one might just be you. The Apache woman, still trembling, followed the rancher through the dusty trails toward a small, hidden clearing where the sun painted golden streaks over the tall grass. Her hands ached from the ropes, her spirit weighed down by the memory of fear, but every step with the calm rancher gave her courage. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly, his voice steady as the wind brushing through the plains. She looked at him, eyes wide, and nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and hope. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath, the distant cries of the men fading into silence. The rancher stopped briefly, scanning the horizon, then turned back to her. "No one should face cruelty alone," he said, "and no one is ever truly alone if someone cares enough to stand up." She smiled faintly, realizing that today had changed her, not just her fate but her belief in humanity. As they walked on, the rancher's quiet courage left an impression that would never fade. And viewers, if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of bravery, hope, and human kindness. You never know when the next hero's story will touch your life.